and welcome back to the Teaching Together podcast, where we celebrate and share the glows and grows of teacher life. I'm Sierra.
And I'm Grace.
Well, we love to start each episode with a glow and a grow, and considering we are coming off the back of some school holidays, I imagine there are a few glows to share. Grace, do you have anything to kick us off today?
A personal glow is that I went to the aquarium in the holidays because I'm a child and I am whimsical and fun and I like to do childish things. And I have not been to the aquarium in a very long time, and so that was really fun. And I got to see a dugong named Pig, and that was great. Saw the penguins. It was just really fun. It's just
tell us about what the penguins are called.
Yes. So apparently the collective noun for a group of penguins on land specifically is called a waddle, for obvious reasons, which is just adorable.
I love it.
The zoologists who were naming that collective noun, they were having fun.
They were
having a great time that day.
It's very descriptive and highly appropriate.
Yes. And I can't remember what they are called when they're in the water, but it's also something adorable. And I was just like, this is the best. So yeah, that was very fun and refreshing. And I also feel like I'm going into this term much less exhausted than I started last term. So even though I had an extra week of holidays over July, I came back to term 3 feeling absolutely smashed still. But this term, I'm feeling a lot more rejuvenated and ready to go, possibly because it's a slightly shorter term, kind of practically in terms of real days kids are at school and whatnot. But yeah, so I'm feeling pretty good.
That's great.
You?
Yeah, I am feeling pretty excited for this term as well. I mean, if you are new or haven't listened to many of our episodes before, you might not know that this is the start of my academic year. So I am going into like end of year term craziness, but with start of the year fresh beginnings. And I actually love it. It gives me this like renewed sense of like, I can do it. I can do this last term of the year because I've got just like a very fresh start. So new classes and like literally the whole shebang starting off this week. So I am actually really stoked. And a super big glow for me that I haven't shared yet is that I got a promotion that starts this term. So I'm also really excited for that. So it's a wellbeing pastoral care role that I will be kicking off this term. So there's lots of new things for me to learn and navigate this term, which I am simultaneously already incredibly stressed and overwhelmed about, but also really, really excited.
Last episode was a recess digest, so it was short and sweet, and we looked at 2 more habits of mind in our series on habits of mind, and those were applying past knowledge and taking responsible risks. So if you want to know what we sound like when we're trying to be succinct, go give that a listen. But if you want some real experience and our opinions, obviously, and some practical tips on those 2 specific habits of mind, give it a listen and go back and find our other recess digests on other habits of mind and build yourself a little toolbox.
So good. Today, we are going to be having a look at the Department of Education's Strong Beginnings policy. Sounds a little bit boring. Don't tune us out yet. I've been reading through this policy and actually writing a bit of an analysis on it at the moment for one of my uni assignments, and I just am simultaneously loving and hating it and just thought it would make some great content for us to chat about today. So we are going to be diving into a little bit about what it says, what it assumes, and what we've actually experienced as teachers who have gone through a bit of a beginning process and our thoughts on the whole thing. But first, it's time for tea. All right, Grace, what are you consuming on this warm summer daylight savings evening?
Yeah, it's not really tea weather, to
It's
be
not.
perfectly honest, but I refuse to quit. I am not a quitter. I'm a sweater. I'm not a quitter. And I'm having a French Earl Grey like always. That's what I'm having. Nothing new here.
Fair enough.
What are you having?
I am having a cranberry and pomegranate tea, also fairly standard for me, especially in this warmer weather. So we are armed with our far too warm beverages and ready to get stuck into it. So let's have a look at what strong beginnings really mean for teachers. So strong beginnings, like I mentioned earlier, is a report that was put out by the Department of Education, and worth noting that this was from the Federal Department of Education, not just in New South Wales. And it's a report by the Teacher Education Expert Panel. So I've been reading it for a uni assignment because we're looking into education policy at the moment, which I thought would be really boring, but I'm actually kind of loving it. And we're using this framework called the WPR approach, which is what is the problem represented to be? So there's like 6 words in that when it's a 3-letter acronym. What problem represent? What's the problem represented to be? So basically the framework is this idea that you can almost analyze any policy that comes out and like backwards map it, to use some of our teacher language, to identify what the initial problem was that they were trying to solve through this policy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's actually interesting, like, and even as I was listening to a book that I'm just listening to for my own personal interest, today the author was talking about national dietary guidelines and like different policies that come out about that. And I immediately was like, oh, if the policy advice is this particular thing, I wonder what the problem was that they were trying to solve through that. And interestingly, random side note, segue fact, is that a lot of the dietary guidelines and policies that we have around nutrition, and this was actually written by an American author, so in America at least, they were actually as a result of how do we keep our defense personnel fed and well nourished while they're fighting wars overseas. And so like a lot of the home front were changing what they were eating to make sure that there was more to be able to like send to their troops. And then a lot of those guidelines have remained in place, even though they're actually not about health and well-being. It's about what is the minimal amount that you can have to avoid like malnourishment.
Which is very different from being healthy.
So look, anyway, random side fact, and I haven't done enough reading and research into it myself, but immediately my brain was going, what was the problem represented to be here? And it was like the whole idea of like malnourishment and what's the bare minimum we can have to avoid a deficiency here and actually help this other particular group of people, like males who are fit and healthy and well in their maybe 20s to 30s, which have very different dietary requirements to women like us. Anyway, so WPR, what's the problem represented to be? So basically I've been reading through this strong beginnings policy and there are 4 main policy reforms that it suggests. Kind of the background for the policy is in response to teacher shortages and how we can kind of improve, teacher retention, especially of graduate teachers. So one of the statistics that it cites really early on in the report, nearly 4 in 10 pre-service teachers or students will leave their course within 6 years of commencing their degree. And around 1 in 5 beginning teachers leave within the first 3 years of entering the profession. I mean, I certainly have friends that I've been teaching with who have kind of said to me that like, I just want to beat the statistic. Like I want to last more than the first 3 years. And then if I can't do it, for much longer after that, then at least I beat the statistics.
Look, you got to have goals. That's so depressing though. And 3 years is like less than you're at uni for to learn how to be a teacher in the first place.
Literally. And especially if you're doing like an undergrad, then like pathway to teaching with like a master's attached to it at the end. Like it's a long time. It's a lot of study. And there's a lot of people who aren't staying in the profession. That being said, as part of my research, I've also found that it's actually really hard to collect solid data on this issue, and there's actually not a lot of research that's been done into it, and looking at the reason for why teachers do leave and why teachers stay and what are their reasons for leaving. But one thing that we need to take into consideration when we hear stats like this is a lot of the time they can be quite dramatically presented, and they might sound a lot worse than they are, because it could be things like okay, within the first 3 years of teaching, maybe you leave the profession because you go on mat leave and then you decide not to come back, and then you're going to come back in 5 years' time. So like, we don't always know the reason for why people are leaving and whether that means they're leaving for good. It could also mean things like maybe you've been on a temp contract for a while and you leave, but then you come back when a permanent position comes up. Or, you know, there's a whole range of sorts of reasons why people might be ebbing and flowing a little bit. So we have to acknowledge, I guess, some of the concerns behind the statistics, but we also need to remember that they're not always the truest picture, and sometimes they can be quite easily kind of inflated to sound a little bit more ominous than they actually are, not discounting the fact that there is a real teacher shortage. Anyway, the policy now goes on basically to suggest that the main thing that we could be doing to improve teacher retention is improve our initial teacher education programs. I have been really struggling with this.
It's so not true. And like, I know that from I'm still an early career teacher, but like, being on placement is probably the most helpful part of the degree. It's the most stressful part, but it's the most helpful part. And most teaching students that I've spoken to have said that, or teachers or whatever, people in education. And like, no matter how prepared you are for your career, you can never be prepared because you don't know what school you're going to be at. There are so many things outside of your control. And saying that, if we, quote unquote, fix the university degree that these people are doing, then we'll fix the teacher shortage. It kind of feels like these policy writers have gone, what's something we could probably control pretty easily? Let's pick that one. We can control that probably more easily than all the other factors. So let's do that one instead of anything that really has an impact, like the culture of the school and resourcing and the actual workload and all those other things that you don't realize until you finish your degree. And also really, they're just a world away from your initial teacher education. Like, they're so far apart. I just think it's almost laughable that they would go, oh yeah, your degree is the number one thing, the most important thing that we can fix to make sure that teachers stay. I don't think so.
Yeah. Like, basically, so their first priority reform is to strengthen initial teacher education programs to deliver effective beginning teachers. That's like the phrasing. So it's basically, it's offensive. It's basically saying that beginning teachers aren't effective and it's their own effectiveness that's stopping them from remaining in the profession.
And you can't hack it, basically.
Yeah, they basically, through the framing of their recommendations from this policy, all of the recommendations are centered around improving the ITE programs, so literally what the universities are doing, and improving practical experiences, which I think that's a really valid one. But even in that recommendation, there's no discussion of, like, you know how there's a lot of places now that are doing internships for teachers? And I think that's a great thing because
school does it, yeah.
Like we've both spoken about before, being SLSOs or teachers' aides while we were studying was like probably the thing that I certainly feel like equipped me the most for being a beginning teacher.
Yep.
And so we know that sort of exposure and practical experience is so foundational to building a strong beginning. I would not say my actual degree gave me much to go from.
And I don't really remember learning a whole lot of actual, here's how you teach stuff.
No. And I know that might be what they're talking about. That might be what they're saying, hey, we need to strengthen some of this. In fact, they specifically mention in the policy recommendations that they want to define core content that has to be taught across all of initial teacher education programs. And the 4 areas of core content are the brain and learning,
effective
pedagogical practices, classroom management, and responsive teaching. So content in relation to First Nations peoples, different cultures, family engagement, and diverse learners. I don't think any of those things are bad. Obviously, I love sort of the education psychology side of things, and I think it's really important for teachers to have some understanding on the actual mechanics behind learning if we're going to do that well. So, I'm all for that. I find number 2 really interesting, to say that we're going to establish core content on effective pedagogical practices. And the ones that they give as examples, get ready for it,
Oh, no.
are explicit modelling, scaffolding, formative assessment, literacy and numeracy teaching strategies that support student learning because they respond to how the brain processes, stores, and retrieves information.
I'm sorry, is this supposed to be like new stuff? I'm confused because all four of those core content things are things that I think my degree was at least trying to address, but also literacy and numeracy strategies that actually help students learn. Well, yes.
Groundbreaking.
I don't understand how much time was spent on this report.
I think the thing that irks me the most about this one is like effective pedagogical practices is so like kind of vague, and effective for whom and effective for when.
And I wish it was less so, but it's quite subjective what an effective pedagogical practice is. And you will have 100 different schools, the classic. You'll have ask 100 people, you get 100 different responses. You could quite easily ask 100 schools how they think, like what their effective pedagogical practices are. And you'll have schools that are wildly opposite. And
it doesn't mean that they're not effective in that context and in particular settings and for particular people.
Yes, which is why we have, local schools and that are, local to the area. And that's why the teachers on the ground are the experts. And I mean, I'm all about getting a toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I think you have to walk into a classroom for the first time with some idea of at least something you can try.
Exactly. And you can't be afraid to take that responsible risk, habits of mind. But the context that you're going to put all that into practice in is so important and will totally shape what you're doing. And I remember thinking at the beginning of my official teaching career, I was like, everything I'm doing now is like, it's not a hypothetical class or a hypothetical student. It's a real student and there's a real context and I've got real school policies and I don't have to make it up for this assignment. And that was actually quite helpful, but also, very influential on, my whole practice as a teacher. And obviously I always go on about inquiry learning at my school, and that's a very specific pedagogical practice that my school thinks is really effective, and then other schools like 10 minutes down the road are doing EDI and it's totally the opposite, but that is quite effective in their context. It's just, it is so vague. It's so vague. And like stop. I can't.
There was this one article that I came across when writing my analysis by a couple of people called Mason and Matas.
Ooh.
Would we say it like that?
That's fun. Is it spelled Matas?
It is.
I think that's Matas. And we're very sorry, Matas, if that's not how you pronounce it, but it sounds really great.
Okay. Yeah, so it's in the Australian Journal of Teacher Education, and it's from a while ago now, 2015, but it was a study done on teacher attrition and retention research in Australia, basically to acknowledge the fact that there's not a lot of data on it, and perhaps since 2015 we've been able to collect a little bit more. But these guys basically did just a literature review of what was out there and did a thematic analysis to try and determine what were the consistent themes in the research that existed about reasons for why teachers stay in the profession and also why teachers leave. There were 13 sort of big common themes that were present across multiple of the studies that they analysed. And I think the thing that really got me the most was one of those 13 things related to initial teacher education or pre-service education. So like, hello, policy writers, there's like a million other things that might be influencing how teachers are coping and adjusting and finding their professional experience. You could come into the profession as an excellent teacher. You might even have come into the profession as like someone who was maybe a vet trainer somewhere else. You've been like an educator of sorts. You actually have a really good toolkit already. You do your postgraduate qualification or something like that. You might come in as a mid-career entrant. And the school environment, the school culture, the amount of professional development that you get, the engagement of your students. Somewhere along the line, we've forgotten that that's a factor. Like there are just so many other different things that could influence how you're finding this profession. And I just think it's so infuriating to silence all of those for the sake of saying, you know what, the best thing we could do is fix our initial teacher education. When we all know that the best experiences that we get are just from being on the ground in the classroom, exposing ourselves to school policies, practices, cultures, getting on alongside with mentors, being in and out of different classrooms, seeing how people do. Like it is, I am just baffled and astounded that we could boil it all down to that and say that we could equip teachers better by just having better uni degrees.
Yeah, absolutely not. Because I have had such a positive start to my teaching career.
Which I'm so delighted for you, by the way.
Thank you. And I love, we had these, they weren't quite performance reviews. It was called a professional reflection. And there were some questions we had to answer before we went in. And then I met with my grade leader and the deputy of head of junior school. And I was able to, as well as reflect on my own performance, I was able to say to these members of the exec, hey, I love working here because you guys are really approachable and you don't make me feel like I'm wasting your time because I'm a young teacher and blah, 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 blah. And yeah, there are so many, looking at this thematic analysis of the research, it's not surprising, but also a little bit scary how many of these 13 factors have to do with the specific school that you're working at. And I say it's a little bit concerning because, like, what if you find yourself at a really dud school and you didn't realize and you've got permanency or you signed a permanent contract or whatever? Like when I was offered my job at my current school, I was actually offered like permanent full-time straight up, which I was very excited about because I'd already done casual at the school and I knew I loved it, blah, blah, blah. But like, what if it had been a terrible school and what if there were no other openings at other schools near me, or what if I have to relocate in the future for some reason and I have to find a different school? Like, yeah, the people that you work with and the students that you teach really matter. Like we've got things like employment conditions. Like, are you kidding me? Just stop right there. It also says structure and pathways, but employment conditions is just like, yeah, school resources and facilities. Like so many things, quality of relationships with the school and the wider community, the presence, quality and nature of formal and informal support. That for me is a huge factor personally in me feeling like I can actually do the job that I've been hired to do. Nature and complexity of our role, presence and quality of leadership. Like all of this is basically saying it's the quality of the people around you, of your colleagues and your superiors, for want of a better word.
And your students and their families.
Yes. All of that impacts whether you stay teaching. And it breaks my heart when I hear of, teachers who, I've heard of teaching students who during their placement had a horrible supervisor who just for some reason made life so difficult for their poor teaching student. And it made them go, I don't want to do this because, I can understand that would make it feel like this is impossible. Like I can't do this forever if this is what it's like. But I've been fortunate to personally experience the complete opposite of that and gone, oh, great. Well, if this is what, my working life is like. I could do this forever. It's a little bit concerning to me because you can't control all those other people around you that dictate your experience, but they do. And it's baffling that, but I go back to my other point. It feels like the policymakers are going, we can't control all those people, but we can control the universities.
Yeah. I think the other thing that really sort of gets under my skin with this whole collection of reforms that they're suggesting is that it's attaching your quality or effectiveness, to use their word, as a teacher to the fact that you stay in the profession.
Yeah, like we all know that is teachers who are not good at their jobs.
Yes, it is attaching teacher quality to teacher retention and basically saying if we can output better quality teachers or teachers who are more effective, we'll keep more of them. I actually think we lose so many highly, highly, highly capable educators because of all those other factors that you mentioned.
Oh, amen. Those are the ones who are probably more likely to leave because they care more about that stuff and they're aware of the other things and they take their job seriously. And I'm preaching to the choir here.
Yeah. So I guess if we were going to be on the policy writing board or expert panel,
all of the boards,
maybe we'll send them this episode. Obviously, it's pretty clear from what we've said so far that we don't believe standardizing or improving the quality of initial teacher education programs is the fix. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be good.
And need somewhere to start.
We need somewhere to start, and we obviously want people to be entering their first jobs or their first, few months and years as a teacher with some level of confidence that, yep, I've learnt some things that are going to help me to do this and I'm not going in totally blind, even though, I certainly feel like if I wasn't working in a school for the 3 years while I was studying, there are so many things I would have been totally blind on.
Amen.
Like, what the heck is a register? No one ever told me what it is.
I kept hearing that word and just going, what? Sorry, huh? What?
Yeah.
Like literally, I think it was halfway through last year that we sat down and started doing them and I was like, oh,
I understand.
Wait, I have to do this every time for the rest of my life.
That's just one sort of silly example, but there are so many little things like that. Little, school-wide policies or state-wide policies, and just like approaches to how we have to do our job, administrative tasks, not to mention the actual teaching and learning happening in your classroom, that you actually have to learn by being in the environment. For example, especially at your school where there's those a very particular way of doing things, you haven't learnt how to do all that at uni.
Correct.
You learnt how to do that because that's the approach that your school takes. And so you've been mentored and trained and developed professionally to do those things. And that environment has been key to you, growing as a teacher and feeling confident and capable in what you're doing. So I just think we can't ignore that human interactive element of what we do. The people, the relationships, the conditions under which we work are so key to us feeling like whether we do love our job or we don't, or whether we could do this forever or whether we can't, or whether we are capable and knowledgeable or whether we're not. Like the environment that you are in is so, so, so critical to that. And so, if we're saying that spending, however much money on revamping initial teacher education again, and bringing in all these sorts of standardized programs like, Landtight and GTPA and a bunch of other things that will probably undoubtedly come and go at various points as they try to fix this problem. Like, I actually think there would be so much time and energy wasted in just revamping our ITE programs as they stand at universities. I really love this idea of teaching internships.
Yes.
I really, really think, now if this policy was framing those as key to a strong beginning, I think I might be able to get on board.
Yep.
Because there is so much more contextually, like we're saying, that you would pick up on just from being consistently in a school environment. Like, I actually have my first prac student this term. Have I told you that? I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I am having a meeting with her this week, and then I think she starts with me in week 3. I'm really stoked, really excited. But you know, like, being in a school for 3 weeks is just, I think it's only a 3-week placement because it's her first one. It is just not enough to pick up on all of those things about culture and policy and processes and things like, hey, we have to register our programs and all those things that kind of happen a bit further apart, and CCD and all those other bits and pieces that happen. Like, even if you were only in a school 1 or 2 days a week, but for a whole year, you would absorb by osmosis so much more of those kind of incidental bits and pieces that actually make up a fairly significant chunk of our job. And like, no one wants to rock up to a meeting. I think you even said, you've talked about this yourself, when like you get to your staff meeting for the week and it's like, okay, everyone, it's time to do our NCCD. So if you can just make sure that that's in by Friday or whatever. And you're sitting there being like, hi, sorry, what the heck is that? Like, someone remind me how to do that again. Or even if it is your 2nd or 3rd year, if you're only doing it once a year and it's like, you know, a period of time where you've got to follow this particular process, and not every school has the same process or protocol for submitting their NCC data, for example. And so it can actually be really easy to forget, like, oh, wait, how do we do that again? And then as a 2nd or 3rd year teacher, you don't want to look incompetent. So it's like, who do I ask? How do I look low-key about this? Like, the consistency for being in a school for an extended period of time, to me, just makes so much more sense. And why aren't we doing this?
Yeah, I was not an intern, but there are 3 interns currently at my school, all of which will have been given full-time jobs next year when they will have finished their degree. And one of them was teaching RFF lessons, and they kind of treat it like a placement. 2 of them were like 1 or 2 days a week. One of them was, I think, 2 or 3 days a week, but they come to our collaborative meetings after school, and they like sit in on planning meetings and are actually like, they're able to contribute. And it's basically like teaching light or like, it's really a good practice run. And because they're an intern, everyone's aware they might need just a little bit more explaining of whatever. And the students know, like, I think it's got a different connotation to, oh, this is a prac student, quote unquote. This is someone incompetent who's going to come and just.
But that's literally, especially if you're coming in as a pracky and you're in a staff room full of teachers who might be loving what they're doing. They might also be super jaded, or they might just go, oh, okay, well, you're only going to be here for 3 weeks, so I don't really have, like, hopefully a mentor, like a supervisor, wouldn't necessarily have that role. Like, if you're choosing to take someone on, like, that's normally because you're prepared to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I know certainly I was like asked whether I would be prepared to. Like, it's not that someone's just forced this on me.
Yeah.
But I think there is an element. I certainly remember when I was on placement at the school I work at now, that my supervisor was great, but it was hard to feel like connected to everyone in your faculty area or whatever, not because they weren't friendly, but just because like they kind of know you're just a blow-in, you know, like you're here for a minute
and then you leave.
Yeah.
There's like, everything is humming along nicely. You just kind of jump in for a bit. You have to command the respect of the students and staff immediately.
Yeah.
And then leave again, and they might never see you again.
And that's really hard. Like, I don't think we should downplay the challenge that is as a practical student.
Yes.
Like, you know, one of their other priorities that they're saying in this report that they need to reform is, you know, the quality of placements. I mean, practical experiences are key. If you have a negative practical experience, that's going to have a really significant impact. If you have a positive one, it's going to also have a significant impact. But it is hard for any teacher to walk into a room of people they don't know students, especially high schoolers, and command their respect. Like you say, everyone knows these days that relationships are everything.
Yeah,
rapport is everything.
We always talk about at my school, the phrase is connection before content. We do it at every staff meeting. We have like a little think, pair, share with like a question prompt or whatever. It's always connection before content, because you're not going to learn from someone you don't trust.
Right.
You're not going to respect someone you don't trust. You're not going to trust someone you don't respect. It's a whole thing. I mean, kindergarten are just delighted by any kind of adult figure giving them attention. So it's a little bit easier. But yeah, definitely in the older grades, they're like, why should I respect you? What have you done to earn my respect? Nothing.
Yeah.
You just rocked up.
Yeah. So
you're like 2 years older than me.
Literally. Sometimes, yes. It's like, I just think it's worth acknowledging that is really hard.
Yeah.
And that any teacher with any level of experience would find it hard to walk into a room of complete strangers and talk to them and like actually teach them something. And so I just think, why are we making it hard for our prac students by already giving them an almost insurmountable task? Yeah. And by the way, have a great prac and be a teacher forever.
Yeah. It's a lot of pressure on everybody.
It's a lot. So I honestly think internships, like if we're talking initial teacher education is something that needs to be improved, I think that has got to be up there on one of the top ways that we improve it. Not giving them more content and not standardizing more content and not doing more standardized testing and blah, blah, blah. It's where you are actually in the classroom that's going to make all the difference. And I just think that if you are listening to this and you're a pre-service teacher, as soon as you can get yourself into a classroom, the better. Start, casual teaching if you can get your accreditation or permission to teach. Look for a job as a learning support teacher or teacher's aide if you have the capacity to do that. Like the sooner that you can be there is just going to be so much more valuable, because our practical experiences as they stand are, I think, on the whole, mostly, probably pretty inadequate.
Yeah. And it's the basics of learning. Like if you experience your learning, it's going to be more impactful.
Totally.
So yeah, it's just hard because you don't choose your mentor teacher. You don't choose your supervisor. And if they're grumpy and jaded, then you'll be grumpy and jaded before your time.
Before your time is up. Before we wrap up, if you could go back to your very, very first prac or very first term as a teacher, what would you tell yourself? What do you think you would say to give yourself a stronger beginning? And / what would you tell someone who is about to have a stronger beginning?
I think the practical experience of teaching was really tricky for me because I'm a really good student and very good at learning answers and articulating them and regurgitating them. I'm a good old Hermione Granger, and I'll put my hand up and, read verbatim from the textbook. So I was really worried about being in the classroom and having my teaching practice critiqued. I was really worried about the feedback because I'd gotten used to, oh, your answer is so great that you were able to think about and write in the privacy of your own head, which is not what being in the classroom is like. And being at my school where there's a really intentional, deliberate focus on feedback and peer feedback and things like that, so that feedback isn't always from a superior or whatever, it's not scary. I would tell past me and anyone beginning their teacher education to be open to feedback. It's really tricky when you're on placement because you don't necessarily get to choose where you go or who your supervisor is. But as much as is within your power, try to find someone that you trust and do have a good professional working relationship with, and ask them for specifics. Like my principal is always going on about the 1% improvement. So maybe for each placement, pick one thing that you want to get better at, because you've only got a 3 or a 4 or a 6 week block. Maybe it might be helpful to say to your supervisor, hey, I know this is my first placement, but while I'm here for these 4 weeks or whatever, could you give me some really specific feedback on my questioning techniques, for example, so that by the end of that placement, you've got some really good practice and feedback from a professional. And then you can go, okay, I'm going to work on that, but then I'm going to keep working on that. I definitely have an ace to that, but my next placement is going to be on something totally different. Because that's kind of how our peer coaching program works at my current school. It's been really helpful because it can be really overwhelming at the beginning to go, I'm just bad at everything. What do I do? Or I don't know what I don't know. I would tell myself to be open to feedback. And I say that knowing that there are there are horror stories of supervising teachers who have just been cruel to their prac students for absolutely no reason. And if that is your experience, then you can't control that. And I am so sorry that's happened to you. But I don't want to scare you if you haven't gone on a placement yet. All my 3 placements were amazing. I was very fortunate. But yeah, seek out feedback from a trusted source wherever is possible for you. From a objective, professional, trusted source that isn't going to berate you and, criticize you personally, because we all know that we're not perfect. It was really hard for me to accept that I wasn't perfect. But I've made so many more professional gains because I've been open to not criticism, but feedback. And trying new things, take a responsible risk.
Yeah.
All right. Full stop.
Full stop.
What about you? What would you tell your past self or someone starting their teaching education?
When I was in my first year of teaching, I struggled the first 6 months. So I think, but I'm also a little bit of a perfectionist, and I just had this idea that I was going to be a fantastic teacher.
Yep.
Which
firstborn daughters, raise your hands.
Absolutely. So I think a personal challenge for me, and if you know that you're that same sort of personality, the best piece of advice I got from my head teacher, who I would say was really my mentor in that first period of my teaching career, was that the job will never be done. And so I think that that whole idea of 1% improvements would have been really helpful for me at that time. He wasn't saying the job will never be done as in like just give up and walk away, but he was trying to Sorry. He was just trying to help me set some expectations for myself that like I could work till 10 o'clock at night, or I could work till, 4 in the afternoon. And regardless, I'll still feel like there's more to do and I could still be being better. That I've had to take care of myself. And so I think we know that there are so many other things than what happens in our training and our preparedness that is going to impact what happens in the classroom. And so an acknowledgement that, it's okay to step away and, have an early night or, go for a walk and just give yourself some like space to stay well and healthy, because we also get sick a lot in our first year.
Yeah. All those germs.
As teachers, you're exposed to all those germs, and also you're under the pump and you're probably stressed and, the whole range of different things. I think I would want to give myself just a little bit more permission to know that it's not all going to be perfect at the start, and that doesn't dictate my teacher quality. Like, I'm not a bad teacher because it's not all perfect and I don't have every single facet of my teaching toolbox and my classroom routine perfect from day one, which is, I think, what I was trying to do.
Amen. I would just add, don't get too in your own head. Don't compare yourself to experienced teachers. But yeah, it is helpful to get feedback because you might get some really positive feedback. Like in my professional reflection, the head of junior school was like, Grace, a strength that I've noticed in you, because I was struggling to name strengths about myself. Oh my gosh. Was that apparently my behavior management is great. Apparently.
Wow.
During one of our chapels, I was getting my students on stage for our adorable item. We sang a song. It was very cute. And the principal was sitting next to my grade leader. And the principal was like, Grace's behavior management is awesome. And I was like, are you kidding me? My behavior management is terrible. So you are probably not the best judge of yourself. It's helpful to be reflective, but get outside opinions, well, not opinions, but, observations and things as much as possible, because you might uncover some positives about yourself.
Yeah.
And that really just made me go, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I could do this. Like, I keep calling myself a baby teacher, quote unquote, but I'm good at my job and I'm a professional and you got this. If you want to be a teacher, go out there and teach. Anyway, you can find us on all the socials.
You can.
Check out our website, and on our website, you can contact us via email if you so desire. And we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Spotify, we're on pretty much all of the socials at Teaching Together the podcast. We would really love to hear if you have any practical tips for younger you, or if you're looking for practical tips, hit us up, comment on our Instagram or Facebook. We do want to create a community where we can look out for each other, because we are not cynical and jaded yet, and we want to remain that way. And thank you very much for listening all the way to the very end of this episode. And we really hope you enjoyed it, because we certainly did. But until next time,
Bye.